Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware. Hello and welcome to the Aware Show. I am Lisa Garr, and it's such an honor to be here with you because we get to have a conversation today that inspires my positive growth and change, hopefully yours as well. And if you hear anything or experience anything on this show that you want to share with a friend, you can always go to our podcast, the Aware Show podcast, and you can share information from there. It's on demand, so you can listen anytime. So sharing is caring. You could check out our podcast at the Aware Show podcast. So question for you. Do you ever call someone and they were just trying to call you at the same time? Or maybe you've been talking about someone and then they contact you and you say, oh, your ears must have been burning. Or here's one that happens to me a lot. I'm an avid cyclist and a mountain biker specifically. Or if you're ever out on a trail and you're the only one on a trail, and then all of a sudden a car and a bike and several hikers and a baby will all intersect at the exact same time. Happens to me more often than it doesn't. And I am super curious about this conversation around coincidences. Maybe we have more to do with the energy of coincidences than we actually think. Now, there are very few people on this planet that have studied this and really actually understand coincidences. Like psychiatrist and our guest today, Dr. Bernard Beitman. He is, in fact, maybe people call him the king of coincidences. He has an entire book about this called Meaningful Coincidences: How and Why Synchronicity and Serendipity Happen. There is a science to this. Dr. Beitman is actually the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to systematize the study of coincidences. Bet you didn't know there was one. He's a graduate of Yale Medical School, and he did his psychiatric residency at Stanford, and he is here today to join us to talk about this fascinating topic. Welcome, Dr. Beitman.
Lisa, what fun. What a great introduction you had right there.
It's definitely a passion of mine because, I mean, my husband and I, we are cyclists, and so many times when we're out in a mountain bike trail, we'll be the only ones out there for minutes, hours, and then all of a sudden 4 or 5 people cross the exact same vortex at a time, and then we all go off into our separate ways. And I always think of all of the things that had to have happened to line that moment up beforehand. Did I stop to fix my shoe? What time did I actually leave? What time did they leave? Did they stop? All of that had to align for that moment to happen. It happened so many times, I started looking at it energetically. So I'm super curious about your discovery, and first of all, how you even got interested in this topic of coincidences.
Same reason that you seem to have gotten. One thing that's worth mentioning is that some of my research with Bruce Grayson, who you know, from the Division of Perceptual Studies, showed that people who have near-death experiences experience more synchronicities after the near-death experiences than they had before.
That is so true. That is my story. Absolutely. That is fascinating. Fascinating. I do look at it as an energetic exchange, but I do look at things differently since that NDE. That's 100% accurate.
Well, I hope we talk about what energy means, because it's so important to understand its variations. The place that I experience it most often is on the dance floor. I do a conscious dance thing, or 5 rhythms sometimes. Yeah. And the energy among and between and in the place is just, whoa. Some days that it's so amazing that they don't want to leave. It just, there's so much love in the place. And some days they just get out of there because there's not much happening. And then there's energy between people and among people. That's energy in person, which is one thing. But when you're talking about the crossing things, I mean, that's a literal coincidence. When you're riding along, nothing's happening. It's a low probability thing that you're going to run into somebody because of where you are, and then you get hit by it. And you're the first person this brain has heard say that, because I see that a lot. I say, oh, there's another car at this intersection, or this is happening, and there's all the street, there's nobody in either direction, and that keeps happening. So I'm very glad you told us that one, because it's a common one, and it doesn't do the thing that I'm going to ask you about yet. Is sometimes we find meaning. Remember, I'm talking about meaningful coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
So meaningful and meaningful coincidences has two different meanings. I like
Right.
playing with words like that. One meaning is, you've talked about the explanation. You call it energetic, and I hope we'll get into that. But the other is personal, that sometimes you're going to meet somebody up there on that crossroads that like Oedipus at the crossroads. You're going to run into somebody like you ran into his father and didn't know it. And that's that kind of crossing sometimes has meaning. Have you had meaningful coincidences that are personally meaningful?
Since I started looking at it energetically and realizing it happened more than 50%. So my husband and I were looking at the odds. It happens more than it doesn't. So the odds are in the favor of it happening.
Huh.
So then I thought, okay, I might as well just talk to some of these people, because there's something that energetically, yes.
Pause, as in question mark, because the key to making coincidences happen among them is to ask.
Yes. Yes. And so I just thought, okay, we obviously must be doing this for a reason. So I stop a few on the trail every now and then and say, it's so interesting that all of us just crossed here together. Somehow we're all either having a really great day or all really meant to meet at this moment. And sometimes people look at me really funny. And then some people just go, okay, yeah, actually, we're having a really great day. And then we all go off on our merry way. I don't stop very long because we're all in the middle of a, exercise or something. But I know someday I probably would find 6 degrees of separation with someone, or, yeah.
Well, it's easier when you're sitting down next to somebody on a plane, because they're not moving, and you can ask.
100%.
I had a story of a guy that was pretty famous for a while on an unnamed TV show, and then became a more radio oriented guy. And then he was looking for another job, and he ends up sitting next to the boss of the guy who's interviewing him for the job, and he's on his way to the interview with the guy he's supposed to interview with. So he figured, oh yeah, it's such a great conversation with this boss that, boy, this intersection means that it's meant to be.
What is the difference between that? And then I was talking with the client the other day it was her last day of work. It was a big decision for her to quit this job. And she went on a walk that morning and saw a double rainbow. So that was her coincidence, her validation that I'm on the right path. Is there a difference are there different types of coincidences, I should ask?
Oh, definitely. And when I do my webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm going to ask, is double rainbow at the time of the Queen's death a coincidence?
Was there a double rainbow at the time of the Queen's death?
It is. You can see it on YouTube and other places. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well.
It's. I was talking to somebody, a reporter, about that, and it was like she had that as a thing, and the people in London and England are very interested in that, because it was to them such a remarkable coincidence to have the double rainbow and around the Queen's death. So here's an example where I say, well, I don't know, because the death is not like a double rainbow. When I look at coincidences, it's usually like some kind of analog, parallel similarities between the two incidences of a coincidence. A double rainbow doesn't look like death to me. So it does to some people. So I'm raising that as a question, because it's a good example of wanting to find meaning and then finding the meaning you want to find.
I think it's a perfect example of death, because it's a transcendence, it's a prism, it's different perspectives. I would see that
Good.
very.
That's why I'm asking, because I'm really kind of dumb in some ways, and in
I would
dumb,
not call you dumb.
well, I say that because I'm willing to ask what seem like stupid questions, which the schools I went to encouraged, because they are sometimes through to the other end. So I didn't make that. What is the meaning of the double rainbow is transcendence to you? Uh, Now, what do you do for somebody who is and this I reported in my book, who's a highly orthodox highly orthodox head of a religious organization, and he sees a double rainbow around the time of the flooding of New York City.
Mm.
And he says that's God saying it's all the gays' fault.
Ah, right.
What do you
So
think of that?
it's the meaning that you prescribe to it based on your experiences. So my experience having a near death accident was a seamless connection with all that is. That was my experience of that moment. Even though my body was dying, I was having a completely different experience spiritually. So maybe the Orthodox Jewish person had something in a context that they read that equated rainbows and people of, in same-sex relationships. Maybe it's all the context of what you have. Isn't that what we do? Everything we see is through our perceptions. Everything. It's our
And
rose glasses.
that's absolutely that. And I start with, if you want to see more coincidences, you got to believe that they're useful. Not, and you know this from your own experiences and what your interviews, that it's not just seeing is believing, but it's believing is seeing. What we
Yes.
believe is what we see. So starting with the belief that meaningful coincidences exist and meaningful coincidences are useful, both personally and to understand how the world works, is a place to start.
Yes, and that's interesting because the Native American culture, of course, believes in so many coincidences with feathers and rocks and all sorts of that. A lot of heritage is built on these symbols, the symbolism. So, what is your definition of coincidences? How does it differ from symbolism?
From symbolism, well, let's just define coincidence, because represent, they have in them sometimes symbols, as the rainbow is a symbol. And sometimes they're pretty concrete. They actually tell you what's a good thing to do. It's not, it's a little bit like the story of a guy telling me about this hummingbird that was near his hummingbird feeder. Um, and the hummingbird came right up to his third eye and fluttered right there in front of him. And he's a really mellow, easy guy. So it came up there. So he wondered, and he for some reason he went over to the bird feeder, and he noticed there was no food in the bird feeder. The hummingbird had come over to tell him to put some food in it. It wasn't metaphysical. It was very practical. And that's true of some coincidences. Here, this coincidence in the bird feeder, and he had to put the two together, and it became not a coincidence. One of the ways of defining coincidences is we don't know the explanation. We think there might be one. So it's two, just like your road warrior things, it's two different events coming together that seem unrelated. They seem to come from different places, and that's where the fun is. Seem to come from different places.
Okay.
And that seeming gets the crossing, and then that makes you wonder, how did that happen? Man, what's the probability of that?
Right.
Anyway, yeah. And what does it mean to me? Sometimes people ask. So, but it's got to have maybe a meaning to it.
And that's what meaningful coincidences are, as opposed to um, just the understanding of coincidences in general. The
Well,
meaning you give them and the perspective you have around them defines them, right?
symbolism is part of what you just said. Yes, it's what does this symbolize to you? As the rainbow one is a very open symbolism. The rainbow is used in lots of different places. The double rainbow, I'm not sure how often that's used. You may know better than I.
I don't, but I do know that it's a spectacular sight. And you can also explain it from weather pattern perspective, but seeing it feels like a bit of a miraculous perspective because I mean, look at all the symbolism around rainbows, unicorns, lucky charms, things like that. You know, you see that symbolism a lot in cultures. So, of course, it would have some meaning. It's not something you see every day. Very rare.
It's no, especially a double. And I love singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" to my grandchild.
Right.
It's so, and if you look at that, someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. I mean, wake up where the clouds are. How high are you getting?
And the
Where
lifting of the clouds. Yes, yes.
it's a lifting of the clouds, heard in a lullaby, someplace where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. Well, it stretches the mind, that particular rainbow song. And so I think that captures some of what you're saying. What is the symbol? People come there with their own symbols of what that own ideas of what that means. Some symbols, as I was suggesting with the hummingbird, are ain't I'm hungry. That's what it means. Um, or
Simple.
maybe intuition. Some one of the key things about meaningful coincidences is tuning into this broad category that we call intuition. That's part of what's inside of us. And when you have near death experience, you start believing there's more going on around you, and you tune in to the voices and the feelings and the kind of impulses that tell you to go here and not go there. That helps to create meaningful coincidences.
Is there a difference between that and synchronicity? Synchronicity, something that's synchronistic.
The title of the book, as you read, is Meaningful Coincidences: How and Why Synchronicity and Serendipity Happen. Please go to your local bookstore to buy it, not online. But that's just a
Nice,
commercial number,
nice.
please. And this is the only book that I've seen that includes both synchronicity and serendipity. And there's several reasons for that. I've noticed that many people use serendipity for synchronicity and synchronicity for serendipity. The definitions overlap. It's a Venn diagram of overlapping.
Mm.
So I, in this book, try to define what's similar about serendipity and synchronicity, as well as how they differ. And they differ, generally speaking, but not specifically, because people use it again in the same overlapping ways sometimes. Synchronicity has been invented by Carl Jung. The term has been invented by Carl Jung, and the term meant an acausal connecting principle, that things came together because of meaning, not because of what we generally think of as cause. And he was using this acausal connecting principle to explain astrology and the I Ching,
Hmm.
as well as many parapsychological things like clairvoyance and precognition. But he didn't call those events synchronicity. He called them meaningful coincidences. But as you know, as time has gone on, a lot of people use synchronicity for equivalent of meaningful coincidences.
Hmm.
On the other hand, serendipity was invented by a British member of the House of Parliament uh, in the 1700s, um, uh, because he could find things that he was looking for by accident. So serendipity has become, in the short term, happy accidents, finding things or even people, like for jobs, by accident. You kind of need it and you're looking, but you find it in a different way, or you even aren't looking, but you happen to find something. Wow, I really need that. But they are happy accidents, and the Nobel Prize winners are describe the happy accidents, but not to the general public, because they want to make it look like they're scientifically blah, 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 blah. But no, if somebody turns on the heat, of something somebody has on the stove but didn't mean to have it heated, and creates a new chemical that helps science look at cells operate, can freeze the cell in different colors and see what it looks like. That was an accident. And the discovery of many pharmacological agents have been by accident. And running into somebody when you need somebody, when you need that somebody, without even knowing who that somebody is going to be, but it's there, like this guy sitting next to the right guy on the airplane. But the funny thing about that story, that's why he doesn't want his name known, is because it didn't work out. And it's a very important idea about meaningful coincidences. They are guideposts. Sometimes they're tricks. They're the trickster working on you, playing around with you. And that's very true with romance. Romance, one of my most popular posts is, and it has in its title, "It's Meant to Be." And that's what people feel when they get together. Oh, this is real. Oh, man, why?
There's a reason for everything, right? There's that.
What they think. That's what they think. And I have a post on that. We can take that one apart if you want to. But they come together thinking that the feeling and the amazement of the low probability of this meeting and the way we did means we are meant to be together. But I've talked to people who started that way, but they didn't work on their relationship.
Okay. So, I mean, just to unpack the guy on the plane that sat next to the guy whose boss was interviewing him, and it didn't work out. The job didn't work out, right?
He didn't get the job.
So how do you explain that? You can't look at everything as a validation, right? You just have to remain curious.
Curious is so important, Lisa. Oh, so important. It's part of what's important about meaningful coincidences is they stimulate our curiosity. And that's really important to do. So it required this guy to wonder what happened, what did I miss? And what he missed is that these are maybe sometimes things don't work out. That I call them those pesky false promise coincidences, because we think it's going to work out. But as with a lot of things, sometimes it looks like it's going to happen, but it doesn't. You know that, I know that, but it looks like it's going to happen. No, as Yogi Berra liked to say, it ain't over until it's published or it's over.
Well, that's interesting. So it maybe caused that guy, we don't know, but to look into what he missed or didn't do to get that job and find something that maybe was that knowledge carried over to his next experience.
That's what we have to think. And again, it's the same principle that I bet you know, that one door closes and another window opens or something, whatever you'd like to call it, because sometimes it's a good thing not to get the job. I was denied tenure at the University of Washington. Hey, come on, I'm a nice guy. I got 25 papers published. Come on, what's wrong with that?
Wow.
They kicked me out of there. And it was painful. And on the way out, I said goodbye to a colleague of mine, and on his desk was a paper on chest pain and panic disorder, and he had a protocol about how to study chest pain in primary care family practice clinics, a one-page thing. So I said, "Thank you, Wayne," as when he said it was okay to take it. I got 40 papers out of that and became chairman of the psychiatry department at the University of Missouri. What do you make it? What do you take away from that story? I'll tell you what I think about it.
I find that when you're in a place where you're in maybe where it's not always going your way, and maybe there's possible rejection, that you start really looking for other solutions. I think if it all worked out for you, you would maybe have not been looking for that.
We wouldn't be talking. We would not be talking. I would be something else. And you said it. You said, I'm so glad. I wanted to hear, because I thought you might. You keep looking.
Yes.
You keep looking. And that takes a particular attitude.
Yes. Attitude. I mean, look, I've been a solopreneur my whole life. And
solopreneur.
Now I'm kind of a dualpreneur. But if I didn't understand to learn from rejection, I would never get this far in life, ever. And I have learned so much from the rejections, as painful as they've been. You know, as an entrepreneur, you can get hired and fired multiple times. And it is it is really interesting to keep growing and learning. I feel you're always growing. And then there's of course the cellular biological conversation. If it's the cell isn't growing, it's dying. So you're always growing. I'm always growing. That's just kind of what I think, but it's not always pleasant. It's sometimes very painful.
And we learn, including you in this and others too, that we learn to embrace these disappointments, these rejections, these difficulties, including getting significantly ill and having to deal with them and going through the dark night of your soul and trying to make the transformation that is there for you to make. But if you're just cruising along, everything's all right, you're not going to do it, which brings to the idea that coincidences are more likely to happen, as happened to this guy and certainly happened to you when afterwards anyway. When your life gets really thrown around and the basic structure gets changed a great deal, coincidences are much more likely to occur.
It's fascinating. You never really know though. Like if you know, I have an aunt who's I thought just brilliant, and a friend of our producer also has a brilliant aunt, but they both have debilitating diseases. And it's like, how does that, you question. And of course the human spirit's going to say, why? Why waste such a brilliant brain? Sometimes you just don't know.
Yes, sometimes you just don't know.
Hmm.
But I get curious. The woman across the street where we lived in Columbia, Missouri, was a wonderful, wonderful woman. And she got ovarian cancer. And she was such a giver,
Oh.
such a giver. And to me, it was easy. She just overstrained her nurturing ability, and
Mm.
that did something to her ovaries. Now I can't prove that, but that's the kind of metaphorical thinking that I've begun to try to do, as the body sometimes is an expression of some kinds of difficulties, some kind of overdoing it or underdoing it, but not always. Not always.
Right. And you don't know, sometimes you just don't know the soul and that particular journey. But what we do know is that coincidences happen a lot. And I'm curious if you have any idea on the statistics around coincidences. They
Funny that you
happen.
funny that you should ask.
Oh, good. I thought you would know as a professor.
Well, the scientific method is an attempt to be able to keep a null hypothesis in mind, which is like, I don't know, but you raise a which,
Right.
which is like you which is like you raise the question. Well, I don't know, so let me see if I can figure out a way to do it in a controlled way to ask this question. And my question was, these things really happen out there? They happen to me, but how often do they happen out there? And I wanted to know that. So at the University of Missouri, I got some researchers together and we put together a valid and reliable scale, the Weird Coincidence Survey. Valid and reliable are two very important words that I'm not going to try to explain, but you try to have a scale be valid and reliable. Valid means it's repetitive, and reliable, it means it measures what you're trying to measure. And we just were able to do that and found out a lot more. But what are the most common coincidences? You just listed them, some of them at the beginning. You ever think of somebody and like maybe you haven't heard from them in a long time and maybe they call you right then?
Yes.
And we started that weird coincidence survey with a story. Uh, it was a woman in her late 20s who was in Alcoholics Anonymous because she was drinking too much. And she got to the big book. And in the big book, there was a statement about alcoholics being like having a disease like cancer. And she began to think more differently about her father because she hated her father. She rejected him. She was critical of him because he was such a drunk and he behaved so badly. But reading that and thinking about herself uh, somehow came over her a forgiveness for him. She
Mm.
hadn't had contact with him in years. And as she was forgiving him, and feeling at peace about it, of course, you know what's going to happen.
He
The
calls.
phone called. He called on her phone. She didn't know he had her phone number. And he says, I'm thinking of you, and I regret so much the way I was treating you, and whatever I can do to help you, I will do.
Wow. That is a wonderful coincidence.
And we will now talk about how stuff like that happens.
Yes. Okay.
And I want to hear your energy, what you're talking about energy, and I'll have my energy information thing. And the first thing is the name for this is telepathy. You may have heard the term.
Mm-hmm.
It's telepathy. People use a lot of telepathy is telepathy means having a feeling at a distance, or feeling an emotion at a distance. But right now it means thoughts. And I came up with a new word, simulpathity, which is the original definition of telepathy, which is feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance. And I asked the question in the Weird Coincidence survey, do other people have experiences like that? And the answer we got back from 1,000 people in and around the University of Missouri was sometimes. Sometimes I feel the pain or distress of a loved one at a distance. So that confirmed a personal experience of mine. And it also, the other answers also confirmed what you said at the beginning about thinking of someone and having that person unexpectedly contact me. That is one of the top 4 meaningful coincidences that our group reported. There are other ones.
Right. Okay. What's another one?
Yeah, because you got that one right there. And
yep.
One of my favorites is because I'm like trying to figure stuff out. Is like, and I can use all the help I can find.
I love it.
So sometimes I'm kind of jumbling along, thinking about something, and then I go on the internet, and there it is. There's the answer to what I'm stimulating in my mind to try to find an answer for. And that is one of the other most common 4 coincidences. I think of a question only to have it answered by an external source, radio, TV, or even other people before I ask it.
I think that's Google listening.
You should say that. You should say that. It is Google listening for some of them when they're trying to sell you something or trying to get you caught up in something. It's very important that you say that. This was done before Google got really going in 2006, but it's very important. Google does do that, but you can make a distinction between information that you want to use for your personal reasons and somebody trying to get you to do something.
Right. I mean, especially if you're thinking it and then that information appears, it's a totally different thing. Yes.
Totally different.
That's fascinating. And I don't know if that's happened to me, but all the other things have. I'm sure everyone watching can think of something in there as we start talking about the topic, something that is synchronistic that has happened. And if you look at it as not a synchronicity at all, but as a planned intentionality, I often do story coaching with people. So I help them discover their stories. And so when you look back at someone's story that maybe went through a very challenging time, and that caused them to do something, like one particular lady went through a very abusive relationship. Then she decided to become an interior designer. As she got out of that relationship, she needed to build something for her and her children. She helped people design spaces, which then got her into real estate. And now she's helping underserved, abused women get back on their feet by finding low-income housing for them to live in. And that's her niche. I mean, all of that, would you say that's a synchronicity or that's a journey? It's
definitely a journey. Where's the synchronicity that started this?
Her landing in an area that she found safe, which was Tahoe, was like up in the mountains somewhere. And that place got her started in the interior design. She would have never approached something like that.
If she hadn't gone to Tahoe, she wouldn't have started.
Right, exactly.
All right. And then one of the other 4 frequent meaningful coincidences. I advance in my work, career, education by being in the right place at the right time.
Right. That is a good one. The right place at the right time.
And here, let's talk about energy for that, because it's happened with you. It's happened with me. Like, I walked into that colleague's office and came up with that paper that got me to be able to talk with you, really, because I got to be chairman of psychiatry there because I had enough papers to be able to do that, and they were databased and all the other things.
Wow.
It's how does that happen that we do these things? How does it do it energetically? I think some of it is psi-mediated instrumental responses, which is a fancy way of saying something that I call internal GPS or human GPS. And a chapter of my book is about this, that you get to the right place at the right time without knowing how you got there. I mean, you have your rational reasons, like a guy shows up late to the wedding of his ex-girlfriend. He didn't want to be there, but he decided, and he ends up not only late, but late for the dinner to start. And there's one place to sit, and you got the rest of the story because you understand you have to ask. So he started talking to a guy next to him. Well, the guy showing up late needed a job, and the guy next to him had a job for him. So there is a very nice phrase, what you're seeking is also seeking you.
Right. Yes.
You know that one.
Is it Ram Dass? No.
Rumi, I think.
Rumi. Yes. Yes. What you're seeking is seeking you. And that has to do with, you talk about energy, and
Please.
You can also talk about frequency. So if you're resonating at the frequency of something, so say I want a job and I'm really looking for, happiness or a relationship or whatever, that will start to emanate throughout your field and find like attracts like. And that frequency that's looking for that will start finding that frequency. This has been measured. It has been measured in many ways, but I'm trying to think of the institute that measures. I mean, the Monroe Institute measures a lot of this phenomenon. There are a lot of studies of people that I have interviewed that have talked about this very thing, and it's epigenetics also. There's a lot of fields around this particular field of theory of frequency, and they call it law of attraction in the personal development world, but Greg Braden talks a lot about it. Bruce Lipton talks a lot about it. Heart Math talks a lot about it. It's definitely being discovered in various esoteric studies. What do you think?
Well, it depends on what you mean by it's being discovered. What is it that's being discovered? And I've had to sharpen my ideas about that. The law of attraction, the original book, had a general passivity to it, that you just think about it or put up a screen, which helps. And put up one of those vision boards.
Images.
And that helps. It really does help. But the key thing, in addition to that, is you got to do something.
Yes.
You've got to be out operating in the world. And an old gypsy parable is the dog that trots about finds the bone.
That makes sense. That's the action piece.
What I'm interested in is what you described, and can it be measured, is the resonating between my thought form. I'll use that term if that's all right. My thought form and a similar thought form out there. And I call that out there, the place where the resonating meets each other, our mental atmosphere, or the psychosphere. Teilhard de Chardin called it the noosphere.
Yes.
And in that place, there are the vibrations that you can resonate with. And the clearer you are about playing your middle C and the other chords associated with it, so you get a real good chord, other notes, so you get a nice chord going. And the more detailed that chord is, the clearer it can be about finding its mate in the psychosphere. And that resonating then finds a way, and I can talk about that, or we can talk about that, to bring the two thought forms together.
Yes. I mean, it's easy to relate to maybe a parent-child relationship because there's a very close bond there, and you're thinking of the child and then the child calls, or something like that happens where there's a really like intimate DNA bond. But when there's no apparent bond, that's where it becomes very curious, where there's a randomization of these synchronicities. And you have to really look into those and say, well, is there anything that was a through line here? Is there anything that might be connected? And you usually find that there is. If it's even a desire, that could be it. I'm trying to think of one situation.
Let me give you one and see
Oh,
what
good.
you do with it.
Okay.
Because I really want to dialogue with you on this one, because you have a very interesting perspective on this for me. So it's a curious
That
thing.
was kind.
Okay. It was kind. It was also true.
Oh,
So this story took place on March 12th, 1951.
Okay.
And the two locations are Great Britain and United States, where we're talking about, you see two hands, so something's going to come together like this. So on that day was published in both places a cartoon comic book character named Dennis the Menace.
Really?
The same day, March 12th, 1951. My father's birthday, so I remember that. And the two Dennises weren't the same. They each had a dog. They each got into trouble with their dogs, and that's why they were both Dennis the Menaces. But the one in England was deliberately a bad boy, and the dog was too. The dog caused enough havoc by himself. And then the one in the United States was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy who stumbled into problems along with his dog. They tried to find out, did they like copy each other somehow? No, they couldn't really see a relationship, that they had met somehow.
Same name of the character or no?
Same name of the character.
Same Dennis the Menace.
Same Dennis the Menace,
Wow,
and with a dog, a little boy who causes a lot of trouble with his dog. That was the same.
That is random, or is it? Is it?
Oh,
So,
go for it.
okay. I mean, thinking about the 50s, and you had the like these shows on television that talked about the gang, like the Bad Boys Gang and West Side Story and those types of narratives. I'm looking at narratives that are happening. Could someone extract that idea of a boy and his dog? Easily. And maybe there were two that were a girl and her pet rabbit, but that didn't become very famous until later. Charlotte's Web, I mean, there was not a rabbit, it was a spider, but the ideas, maybe it was just part of the narrative. Maybe it was answering the call to the narrative of the time of, bringing back that Norman Rockwell or everyday type of story and getting out of the pain of a situation of a war-torn community. Could have been.
When you say the narrative of the time,
Yes.
Would you elaborate on that a bit?
I'm looking at like coming out of an era of wars that were going on. This maybe 10 years later, 5 years later, but people were looking for normalcy. They were looking for something that created a pattern of a normal pattern, finding the new norm, and maybe having something as simple as a boy and his dog getting into trouble was something that humanity needed at the time.
That's so good. That is so good. When looking at these meaningful coincidences, it's so important to get contextual, which is what you just did. And so important to be able to tell the story right, too, and which you are trying to help people do. And I am, in my way, trying to help people tell coincidence stories better, because some of them just go on and on and on and on, and with details that are only interesting to them. What you just did was describe the context in another narrative. And the idea that having the normalcy of a boy and his dog, which is so like me. I mean, I had my dog, and we didn't cause too much trouble with some. We we played around. We did things.
Yeah.
Found turtles in
It's
the forest.
adventure. It's adventure. Yeah. But it's in an innocent form.
It's it's adventure.
Yeah.
That this that that the same image came up at the same day, were
I
published on
know
the
that
same day. That's you got that. See what you do with that one.
nothing. I got nothing. I mean, that is a complete, as you say, random coincidence. And can you see it as any other way? I
Yeah.
mean, you see a pattern?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, this is psychospheric thinking, but the idea comes from lots of reports, including a 1923 paper on on independent simultaneous discoveries. Independent simultaneous discoveries.
Ooh, fascinating.
This happens a lot. Another example was the patent for the telephone. The lawyers for Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray walked in with almost the same diagrams to the US Patent Office on February 14th, 1986, 1986, 1976, and 1970s. They walked in with the same diagrams. Now, what you were talking about is very important to this, because ideas are percolating and percolating, and sometimes somebody comes up with one, but so other people are doing it too. So one of the key lessons of coincidences, if you think you had a weird thing happening, like running into people in strange places that you don't expect over and over again, as you described earlier, kind of, other people are doing it too. I'm one of them. So that these experiences are not just yours. We share a group mind in the psychosphere, the collective conscious,
Yes. Yeah.
collective unconscious, words like that. But I like, it's a mind thing that our minds are part of. And it begins to be a way of explaining consciousness without having to do the big universe thing, which you did. But it's hard to tell where it all ends. I'm just saying it's weird enough right here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just see what we got going on around us.
The collective consciousness. That's true. I mean, if you think about the telephone, there was a need to learn how to communicate faster. Other
Yeah.
than the telegraph, Morse code, there was a need to develop communication quicker.
Yeah.
And maybe that makes sense that that was happening. But this whole idea of the collective consciousness is happening more and more now. How do you see it speeding up with social media and with, instant gratification, our instant gratification community and societies? How do you see coincidences speeding up?
The internet is creating, I think, a scaffolding for the psychosphere, our mental atmosphere. This
Mm,
psychosphere probably exists between the Earth's crust and the ionosphere, where the Schumann resonance takes place. The Schumann resonance is created by lightning in this cavity. And the Schumann resonance has a, a frequency, and that's where you get to some frequency of about 7.8 hertz. That's the resonance basic frequency, but it has other resonant forms that are sometimes double or triple or quadruple of the 7.8 approximately, that resonate with each other. And our minds, our brains, also have the similar frequency from about 7.8 down to 4 megahertz to like about 50, which is about what the Schumann resonance does. So our minds are formed in this cavity between the ionosphere and Earth, I'm suggesting. And because we've been activating so many things into it, it's been a lot of stuff floating around in there, including, I'll suggest, the Akashic record. And by having the internet create a scaffolding that's literal, it creates more opportunities for minds to be able to connect in a non-physical way with not relatively non-physical way in the psychosphere.
I've tracked that entire thing. I'm actually impressed to hear a Yale psychiatrist talking this way. This is very exciting for me.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
I have interviewed multiple people on the Akashic records and the Schumann resonance and all of these terms that I thought were so esoteric, and they make sense if you really think about it, with our consciousness having a collection, a library, if you will, of stories and narratives based on our ancestors that we never even knew. Could be, absolutely could be. And as you say, that space that we're born, when that spark of birth happens between the our atmosphere, somewhere out in our atmosphere, of course makes perfect sense, because we are all part of the same. So hey, if we could actually use these ideas and terms, my friend, to end divisiveness in this particular United States, or to bring humanity together more across the pond, it would really be impactful, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know. I think we're clicking here.
Yeah, we got an idea here.
Well, no, we're clicking because I wanted to be able to talk about that with you.
Great.
I really did. How the psychosphere idea fits with the global warming problem and the violence that we tend to do with each other.
Yes.
And just what is Gaia saying to us with these viruses that are floating around, making us a little crazy, and all these storms and stuff. The Earth is speaking to us now pretty loudly. If you believe anything about symbolism, we're getting
Trying to
hit.
get our attention. Yes.
Trying to get our attention. And I, in the last part of my book, have a thing called a personal note, and it's about the collective human organism. I am asking people to conceptualize humanity as a collective organism, this collective human organism, that each of us is a cell in this collective human organism. And experiences like near-death experiences and reincarnation are information, and synchronicity and serendipity are information about what our role in life is to be. Hey, my job is this coincidence thing. People say, well, it's your passion. Yeah, it's true that it's all that stuff. It's your spiritual journey. No, it's also my job. You know what I mean?
Yes, but there's got to be, something that you want to have as an end game with this. Like, what
Yes,
is
I
the
do.
result?
Yes,
Yes.
I do. So this is my job. What's your job? You have to know your role or your purpose, and we can say that more lightly. And I think we're drawn to purpose. It's a teleological idea rather than just cause. We're drawn to the future of who we can be, and who we can be is also intimated and perhaps in some detail in the psychosphere if we tune into our higher selves. So we become who we can be, and coincidences help us find out who we are and what we can do in daily life. You don't have to get dead almost, and you don't have to have a huge mystical experience, which kind of can be a little confusing about it. You have to talk about what's here. We have problems here, ladies and gentlemen. So find out with synchronicity what you do and whatever else you use, and how you connect with the rest of the human organism, how the cells connect with each other, so that we can become a functioning organism rather than this kind of back and forth conflict, cut off this part of my arm, cut off this part of my nose because I'm better and you got to have it, I got to have it, and you can't. Let's say we're all part of this thing.
Yes.
And if you believe that, if you can construct it, then the collective human organism has a mind, and that mind is connected to the psychosphere, which has a lot of information in it that we can use to find a different way, because we can't solve today's problems with the patterns that got us here.
Right. Absolutely. And these things that feel so far out of reach for us, like the climate change or our climate crisis, where there's I think a collective consciousness of pattern thinking over and over again of how can we solve this? How can we live in a world that does not have these extremes? How can we bring our planet to balance? If just 7.5 billion people started having that one thought, how can I bring this planet to balance? How can I end the extremes? The collective consciousness would start to brew up we see it with over 100 million environmental movements around our globe, 100 million environmental movements around our globe, you
Wow.
think that we would have figured this out. People have. It's just getting this humanity all on that same page. And it was so interesting, I found during COVID, and I know we have to go, but
I really want to. Let me ask you this, because we talked earlier about imagining the future.
Yes.
We have to not just ask the question, we also have to imagine at least some of what needs to be done.
We do. We do. Absolutely. And that is a perfect way to end, is that there is a way to imagine in each of our quiet time or collective time, is to have that frequency about us that wants our planet to be back into balance and wants humanity to be back in favor with each other. And just by having that thought once or twice a day, it will start to rise and grow. And for anyone listening to this show and anyone listening to this incredible information, please try to have that thought once a day of how do we bring humanity together harmoniously and our planet back to balance? How?
And I'm trying to answer that how.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Beitman. I've so appreciated this conversation, and the book has lots and lots of these stimulating conversations in it as well. And I am really, really grateful for you being here. Again, the name of the book is called, tell me what the name of the book, tell me again. Meaningful Coincidences. Yes. And there's a lot of different, as you say, go to a bookstore and absolutely find it yourself. Thank you so much.
Oh, what a delight. What a delight you are.
Oh, you too. Thank you again. And again, if you want to listen to this on our podcast, you can go to the Aware Show podcast and you can share this with friends. And you can also look up the book Meaningful Coincidences and share that with friends. Until next time, I invite you all to stay aware.